Greetings, my children. Tonight's story comes from a very special subscriber, Mike the Naked Bigfoot. His channel will be in the pinned comment below. Mike has been involved in the paranormal for decades. He has some incredible stories to tell. This one came directly from his channel. I'd tell it myself, but he does it so well.
Hey everyone, it's Mike the Naked Bigfoot here. As I've been posting on a little bit of my social media and on Twitter, I've had the opportunity to assist a local paranormal team with an investigation. The team was called out to a home, very prominent, well-to-do family, because the grandparents and the grandchildren had been experiencing some critter that was tormenting and terrifying the grandkids, and eventually found its way into the house and was tormenting and scaring the grandparents. The paranormal team, Hank and Melanie, what they found out when they came there to investigate, they thought it was a ghost or a spirit, because this house is a very old Reconstruction, Southern Reconstruction house, but that fell about around the antebellum period. It's a very large, very old house. It had been in this family's family, in their family for generations. Absolutely beautiful on a huge old piece of property. What they saw on the property, Hank and Melanie, and what the grandkids described and the grandparents described on the property, was a small little creature with red eyes that started out scaring the kids under one of the largest old willow trees I've ever seen in my life, out in the back property where the kids would go out and play in. And it would pop up in the trees and hiss at them and jump down at them, and they'd go right into the house screaming. So naturally, their grandparents and their family thought it was like a wild possum or something. They didn't think, supernatural creature or a cryptid out there trying to get their grandkids. Well, this thing found its way into the house, and the grandparents saw it in the hallways leading down to where the kids would sleep at night. They saw it creeping down the hallway, going towards their grandkids' bedroom. And when the grandfather shouted out at it, he couldn't make out a lot of features of it. He could make out long ears, of course the red eyes, and very long fingers and arms and legs, but a very squat body, and it was creeping down through the hallway. When he yelled out around it, it whirled around on him, and he saw teeth, a flash of white teeth, almost like a grin on its face. And he swore that he heard it laugh at him, this hissing laugh, and it disappeared. It just stepped back and deeper into the shadows and disappeared. It scared the hell out of him. Well, this happened. They saw it several more times in the hallway, and the kids started seeing it underneath their bed. This long fingers coming out from beneath their bed, trying to scare them. Hank and Melanie, they got great pictures and video of scratch marks on the wooden floors and on the bedposts, supposedly made by this thing. It was 3-fingered scratches across the wood and along the hallway where they had seen it walking. They got pictures of the willow tree where there were long, deep, gouged in scratches onto the willow tree, and scratching footprints going towards the windows of the house, because the kids were seeing it outside their bedroom window before it came inside. Hank and Melanie they thought immediately, this is not a ghost. This is not their average haunting or spirit or poltergeist or residual haunting. So they called the resident monster guy in to see what he thought about it. And that was me, of course. So I had my son drive me down there, and I had them walk me through the property, Hank and Melanie, and I got a chance to talk to the grandparents and grandkids and look around a little bit. And my first assumption was it was definitely something supernatural, but it wasn't anything human. And just my basic walking around and listening to how this thing was sneaking through the house and sneaking across the property, it reminded me of two things off the top of my head, and it liked to scare people. It didn't hurt anybody, but it liked to jump out and scare people. At first, I thought it would maybe have been, your classic goblin, your classic fairy goblin that was out on the property. Because remember, this property is old as hell. There could be any kind of elemental living out here. My second guess was something called a fair, which is F-E-Y-R. It's a manifestation of fear itself. It takes on the form of fear. It can't hurt you, but it exists just to scare the hell out of you. And then as I was walking around the property, the grandmother had mirrors all over the property, all over the house, old mirrors. But one in particular caught my attention when I was walking through and I was discussing with Hank and Melanie what I thought it was. And I noticed this huge mirror in the main sitting room that was in a silver frame, or heavily ornate silver frame. And I stopped mid-step. I felt like I was being watched. Something was watching me. It was a cold sensation that started in my arms and just flowed through my entire body. I knew something was focusing its attention on me. And I realized that whatever it was that was staring at me with such intent was coming from this mirror. And I looked at the grandmother who was with us at the time, and I asked her how long that mirror had been in the house, how long they'd owned it. She said that mirror had been hanging on that wall since before the Civil War, and they have owned it, and it was part of the family property even before the Civil War, and it had been on that location ever since then. And that's when it dawned on me that I wasn't dealing with some mindless goblin or mindless fair creature, some little trickster or something that was just there screwing around. I started to suspect it was something a lot nastier, a lot more intelligent, a lot more malevolent. But the only way for me to be sure was to open my senses and come in contact with the mirror to see if it would respond to me, because I knew it was watching me alone. Nobody else was feeling this. I felt like it was looking straight through me. It was peering at every part of my physical and spiritual body, I believe. So I approached the mirror, and as I got closer and closer to the mirror, my face rippled in the mirror, like somebody dropped water on the mirror, on a pond, and I could see a ripple go across my face, just one time, one little ripple across my face. And I reached out with my left hand, and I started tracing the silver frame around the mirror itself, and it was cold. It felt like somebody was shoving icicles in my arm. My veins felt full of just absolute ice. It took my breath away for a moment. And that's when I took my hand and I moved it up to the glass itself, the silver glass itself. And as soon as my hand made contact with that glass, I felt such dark, cold malevolence. I came in contact with something very, very dark, very old. I could feel how old its age. Something that was just, it would never know love. It never wanted anyone else to feel love. I could feel that emotion shooting up my arm. And in my head, I heard something hiss and go, "You're not afraid. Then you need to leave. 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 You're of no use to me if you're not afraid. And I swear it felt like somebody punched me right between the eyes with a snowball. Somebody just dipped their hand in snow and made a snowball around their fist and hit me right between the eyes. And I fell flat on my ass. It felt like I was lying on my ass for, God, hours, but it was only a few minutes. My son ran to my side to pick me up off the floor and get my cane back under me, and everybody was gathered around me, asked me what happened. And I could just say, "Don't touch the mirror." And I made them take their hands off of me. I didn't want anybody else touching me. It was irrational how it made me feel. I was terrified. Whatever this thing was, it recognized me. And then somewhere in the back of my head, I thought, I know what this is. I know exactly what the hell this is. And that's when I looked up at Melanie and I went, "Melanie, it's a fetch." And my son, who has studied some of the books and some of the lore that I've collected, he just stopped and looked at me and he said, "How can that be? A fetch?" And I just looked at him and said, "It was a fetch. It's a fetch. It's a lot worse than what everybody suspects. It's a flippin' fetch." Okay, guys, what is a fetch? A fetch is a spirit being, a creature that exists in the spirit world. The next world, the spirit world is adjacent to the world of the living and to the corporeal world. A fetch is a shape-changing spirit. It can take solid form. Usually, it'll take the form of another person. It'll take the form of a small animal, insects, things like that. The purest definition of a fetch, though, in most lore, especially Irish folklore, fetches, when they appear before people, they usually take the form of a person. They're considered bad luck or ill fortune that will befall the person that they have taken the form of and appeared in front of. To the extreme, it means that person's probably going to die when a fetch appears before them. But the fetch as a being, as a creature, is far more terrifying and far more insidious and than some fairy tale critter. A fetch feeds off of fear. That's its primary sustenance, is what it needs, fear to survive. They exist to evoke fear and create fear, especially out of children. Because children, of course, it's easier to scare a child and to play off of their fears. And they feed off of it. Fetches, unlike a lot of other spiritual beings, don't need to be invited into your home to come into your home. But what they do need to get into your home and to travel, basically, from the spiritual realm into our world or into someone's house, is a very highly reflective surface. It could be still water, chrome, hell, even a shiny wooden floor or linoleum. They can use a reflective surface. To them in the spiritual world, this is a window and a door where they can peer through it and see if it's worth their time coming through to feed. In the case of Goblin House, what the fetch was using was the mirror. That old mirror to pass in and out of the house, out of its world into the house, to feed. It's not easy to get rid of a fetch. Leaving it alone, it just becomes more hateful. It's like it's addicted to crack. A little bit of fear is not enough. It needs more and more and more and more. to get its fix every night. It needs more and more fear to be generated. A fetch does. So this thing was just not. This was just not a one or two times thing. This thing was going to keep coming back to this house over and over and over again, and quite possibly was never going to go away.
Much like Mike thought, the fetch didn't go away easily. According to an email I received from him, it ended with me having to seal the whole house after sealing away the mirror. I got the crap scratched out of me at my house. It followed me home, with friends. So I had to seal my house with my blood mixed with gree-gree powder, like the family's home. They tortured my dreams for weeks before I finally got rid of them. I'd never heard of a fetch before this, so this was a really special story. It makes you wonder about all the lore and legends that have existed and that could exist now that we're completely oblivious to. That's why I had to get permission to share it with you guys. And speaking of sharing, it's time for this week's top commenter. This week's top comment comes from SCP-049. Week after week, SCP-049 leaves these comments. It helps spread positivity. Awesome video, and have a great spooky day, because you're awesome. You're awesome, SCP-049. You all are. You guys are the reason I make these shows. Think about it. I'm a Skeleton man. I have no use for platitudes. I'm glad you're all here having a good time. Maybe we can all try to be a little extra kind this week. Maybe to someone that doesn't really even deserve it. That way we can be really rotten next week and no one will see it coming. Oh, after Mike the Naked Bigfoot left, Grandma threw the mirror out. When the grandkids asked why the mirror was in the trash, the grandmother simply replied, "Fetch." That's when her grandson said, "No, you put it in the trash, you go get it out."